Namaskar. Welcome back to this new module, Business Communication First Year BCom. This video is brought to you by Center of Excellence E-Content Development, University of Mumbai, which is an initiative of excellence to reach out to the students and provide them very interactive mode of e-content in the study further. This video is mainly connected to the previous video which we have already discussed. Now we are going ahead with the new content called the process of communication. So let us start with this process of communication. We have already seen that how the communication is understood with reference to today's world. Communication is a continuous process that mainly involves three elements like sender, message and receiver. These elements are involved in the communication process, which are explained in detail in the further slides. So what are the elements? We are going to see sender, message, encoding, media, decoding, receiver, feedback and noise. So let us just start understanding each and every element of this entire process. First is a sender. Who is a sender? Sender is the one who has some idea to share, who sends the message or who initiates. Message. What is a message? That is an information, that is an idea, that is a view, that's a feeling, that's an opinion, which is generated by sender. Encoding. Encoding is a process. Message is generated by sender, which is encoded symbolically to reach out to the receiver. Encoding of the message also takes into account experience, culture, or maybe the expectation of both sender and the receiver. Next element is called media. It's the manner in which the encoded message is transmitted throughout the channel. The message may be transmitted orally or in written or electronically the way we are exchanging right now. For example, I am the sender right now. I have a message to deliver this topic. My encoding is done in the form of English language, also in the form of some visuals on the screen. My medium right now is an electronic medium, but at the same time, I am also taking care of oral communication where I am looking at you and I am trying to explain something with the help of a language which is English language. Next in the series is the decoding. Now, decoding is completely associated with the way the encoding has happened. It's the process of converting the symbols encoded in the message by the sender to the receiver. Let us take this example of we in the session right now. I have encoded my message right now in the form of visuals, also in the form of language. The assumption says, my assumption on my part as a sender says that my receivers are all aware about the language which I am using right now. So if that is decoded properly by my audience, by my receiver, my message has some possibility to be complete. Next important element is the receiver. This is the person for whom the message is planned. The chain of the message or the communication stops at the receiver sometime. This is the person, this is a side who is receiving the message. The work of the receiver is also to decode the message to understand the complete message if possible. Once the receiver receives the message and encodes and decodes is done properly, then comes the last element of the process. This is called feedback. Once the receiver confirms receiving the message, then understood the message, the last step in the process is called the feedback. In between somewhere, we also have a small element called noise. This is not actually a very verbal meaning or the literal meaning of the noise. This is the noise which we usually identify as the obstruction, some barriers here and there. We are going to talk about these barriers in detail in our further slides. Let us understand feedback. Very important factor and element in the process of communication. As I have already told you, feedback is the final culmination. It's also the process of succession. Let us see what are the types and forms and what are the levels of feedback in process. So what is a feedback? It is an information about the reaction to a product or a message or a person's feelings after receiving that message. Feedback could be individual, feedback could be cumulative, feedback could be immediate, feedback could be delayed. So there are some certain ways, important ways in which the feedback is collected. How do we collect the feedback? Right now we are in the process of communication. This particular video or the communication, the feedback might be collected in the form of a review, a testimonial, or maybe a small test. So as you can see it on the screen, surveys, reviews, testimonials, apps or the company websites, focus groups, usability tests, or just direct non-verbal cues like nodding your head also could be a way to provide the feedback. So what are the types of feedback? First type says it's a positive versus negative feedback. What do you mean by the positive feedback and the negative feedback? I think we all understand that the moment we say yes to any communication, we are agreeing to the message, then that's a positive feedback. The moment we say no, maybe at times it's a negative feedback. This is a very primitive understanding of the word feedback. We are going to discuss about positive and negative in different medium in detail in the further slide. Another type of feedback is called immediate versus delayed feedback. Usually in the face-to-face communication, verbal communication, we expect a immediate feedback. So if we are talking to our family members and family members say, please repeat, it's an immediate instant feedback. When you study in your college or the school and you write your test and exam, when you pass it or maybe don't clear it, that is called a delayed feedback. Another type of feedback which we all regularly do is oral versus written. When we say oral feedback, it is meant for the comfort communication, mainly verbal communication. When we say written feedback, we have many different ways to get that feedback. Another one is called formal versus informal feedback. Formal feedback, we expect that after the message is over or the communication is completed, we expect all the participants to provide the feedback maybe on paper or digital. Informal feedback, on the other side, is something which we don't expect to be giving immediately after this, but still we have to give it in some different forms, some different ways. This is an informal feedback. Another type of feedback is called peer versus self feedback. Now, peer feedback is a regular phenomenon in organization and institution. When we say peer feedback, usually it is advisable to take the peer feedback, superior feedback, or maybe the junior feedback. Then what can he or she do to become better versus what can I do to become better? This is the difference between peer feedback and self feedback. Next is called online feedback, offline feedback. Online is a very uh, popular way to collect the feedback now, especially after these 2 years of online working, online studies. But still, offline feedback, when we are actually given the paper, forms and we have to fill in the details, this is called offline feedback. So let us see in detail what we understand by the word feedback and what are the types of feedback. First one is called a descriptive feedback. Descriptive feedback is where you are evaluating each and every question, but it is a kind of a subjective feedback where you describe question or your opinion or your maybe likes or dislikes. Evaluative feedback usually happens when you evaluate, compare and contrast, or maybe some linear scale, maybe on the scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5. This is something called evaluative. Prescriptive feedback, it is a very constructive side of a feedback where this is not only about giving yes or no, but even you have to provide some of the rectifications, modifications, or maybe suggestions to improve upon the communication. That is called a prescriptive. That means when we talk about the input, output and feedback, they are all very, very closely connected. When we talk about the task or the procedural feedback, feedback at this level usually involves the issues of effectiveness of the communication. Another way to look at it is a relational feedback. That means feedback provides the information about interpersonal dynamics within a group. So in relation to XYZ, one variable, you are providing your feedback, which is known as the relational. Next one is called the individual feedback. So This is a little bit different from the task or procedural and relational feedback, feedback that focuses on a particular individual in a group. For example, is one individual in a group knowledgeable? Does he or she have the skills helpful to this group? What attitudes does she or he have towards the group as they work together to accomplish the task? Usually, individual feedback is associated with the group discussions or interviews in the job. Contrary to individual feedback, we have something called the group feedback. What do we mean by the group feedback? Feedback that focuses on how well a group is performing as a team is considered as a group feedback. And the question raised on individual feedback whether the person is effective, here in the group feedback the question is raised whether the team is effective or the individual is effective.